something that came out of that report is something called the self-sufficiency standard. So here's federal poverty level, right? And here's the self-sufficiency standard. And there are a lot of folks caught in between. So this is the self-sufficiency standard is the income you need to make to live comfortably in Gunnison or your community. And the federal poverty level is what the government says, I will give you SNAP for, I will give you housing assistance for. And we have this gap between those two sort of standards. And the pantry is really trying to help the folks who are in between. They don't qualify for federal assistance, but they are not making enough money to meet their needs in Gunnison.
Welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Cooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and today I have Jodi Payne, who's the executive director of the Gunnison Country Food Pantry. Jodi, thanks so much for joining.
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I understand you're at a home office.
Yes, I live in a little rental in Gunnison, and I have a guest bedroom / office, and it's bright yellow, which is my favorite color.
I love it.
It's great for working.
Yeah, perfect. Jodi, where did you grow up?
So I'm originally from a small rural community, kind of like Gunnison, but arguably smaller. We didn't have a stoplight. We didn't have a grocery store.
Right on.
I grew up in the Thumb region of Michigan, and I when I was a kid, I hated it. I didn't have access to internet. We didn't get to do any of the things that I learned when I went to college that normal children got to do because we were so kind of remote. But it really set me up for success in living in Gunnison.
Right on.
I think that I was well prepared.
So the thumb part of Michigan, like I've got my thumb here, right? I grew up here.
Okay.
You grew up over here. Detroit's here.
Yeah, like in this region.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So this part's rural, huh? It gets pretty thin.
Very.
Interesting.
Yeah, very rural.
Yeah, right on. How did you end up out in Gunnison?
The concise story is a kind of on accident. I moved here in June of 2020, and I was in the middle of graduating from grad school right as the pandemic hit, and was, in 5 or 6 different application processes that as soon as March happened, they stopped. Folks went on hiring freezes. But one of the schools that I was interviewing with was Western Colorado University as a resident director there, and they were of 2 organizations that I was still interested in that hadn't closed their hiring process down during COVID. And so honestly, I moved to Gunnison without very much research. It was the only place at that time that was hiring me, and I didn't even know it was a desert, if I'm being honest. I feel like I kind of arrived here really backwards. I think a lot of people want to come here and they save up and they plan for it, and I was like, this is my only option. Yeah, I have to go here. And so I showed up in Gunnison. Part of the draw was also that they have so many nonprofits. And so I looked that up and thought I might be able to get into this community, and kind of ended up here on accident. I showed up in June and haven't left since.
Jodi, I'm interested to know, where does the passion come from for you to get involved with homeless shelters, nonprofits? Is that rooted in anywhere specific that you can point to?
I think so. In my adult life, I've also asked myself this question: where does this sense of responsibility come from? And my family does not mirror that really at all. But I recently have started to think a lot about my background and where I come from. And I grew up with 2 working class parents. I'm the youngest of 4 children. My dad was a union roofer, and my mom worked at Walmart. her entire career. And that, those both were 30 to 45-minute drives out of our little community every day. I don't think that we were ever incredibly impoverished, but like I have such strong memories of like when 2008 happened and the housing market crashed and how scared my family was. And I was just a little kid, and I could pick up on that. And when I went to college, I really started to understand what it meant to be a part of a community and wanted to engage with my community a little differently. And noticed that in Marquette, Michigan, that's where I went to college at Northern Michigan University.
Nice.
There's a huge homeless population up there. And I think it's colder in Marquette, Michigan than it is in Gunnison, Colorado. I believe that. And there was just these, mostly men, older men who were homeless. And I got involved at a shelter there, and it changed my life. Like that was the first time where I went like, this is, I've never felt like I belonged to something more. These folks are smelly and they're grouchy and they're hungry, and I like them better than my colleagues in the classroom. I like them better than the people I'm working with. And it kind of boiled down to, it reminded me of my hometown. It reminded me of the folks that I grew up with. And I know very well that like the difference between me and someone who's experiencing homelessness or food insecurity is like the difference between $400 and a family member who cares about you, right? If I was homeless or broke, I could call my brother or my sister, and they might not want to, give me some cash, but they would. They care about me. And I started to realize that those connections, those social connections, were so important, and they meant so much to me. And really ever since then, that's kind of where my heart has been, is connecting with the folks who need that additional love in our community.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Cooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommar Garage Door Openers. We believe Sommars are the best in the business when it comes to garage door openers. We always recommend them for residential installs because of the many features they have, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features like a fixed chain that runs along a secure rail for a quiet and safe operation. Click the link to find out more about Sommar Garage Door Openers.
So with regards to the Gunnison Country Food Pantry, explain to me, I've got my own interpretation of what it really does. I think that I've actually, gotten food from the pantry at some point, and certainly donated some food to the pantry. But what's the mission? What specifically is the day-by-day effort going towards?
Yeah, well, the mission is to provide food assistance to those in need. But I might talk for a minute, because the pantry has so much that it does that I do not think people know enough about. So to start with just food distribution.
Yeah. We
distribute food on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And that is where you come in and you shop, right? Like you're at a grocery store. That's one part of our program. Another element of our program is home deliveries on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So volunteers come in the morning, they pack bundles, and we deliver food to those who have a barrier. And a barrier can be anything from, you just are working during every available shift, and you need to get food, but every time the pantry's open, you can't get it in. You can't get in there. Or another barrier that might happen is that you're an adult who's 60 plus and you can't drive, or you're in a walker, or there's a medical ailment. I had a woman call me once, and she had, to her own surprise, had recently become blind.
Yeah.
And she was like, I can't drive anymore, and that's someone that we would home deliver to. Folks who are sick, folks who are experiencing COVID. And then we have just a few other really special programs that I don't know if people know enough about. We have mini pantries in every school in Gunnison Watershed School District, including Crested Butte. And so our mini pantries are where a trusted adult, a teacher, a counselor, a nurse, may bring a child to the food pantry, and they can take as much food home that they can carry in their backpacks. They're all kid-friendly meals. In Gunnison, in the high school, we have a lot more snacks. We've noticed that high schoolers aren't really interested in the meals, but they're growing. Anyone who's a parent knows that kids are constantly eating, and so we make sure that there's plenty of snacks and things available. And then we have our fresh mobile pantry that goes out in May through November into, we call them hunger hotspots. So identify neighborhoods in need, and we bring fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and produce and eggs and meat into those communities in the summertime when school is closed. And we just really want to be sure that kiddos and parents have access to good food. And that's really not hitting all of it, but I don't think people know enough. And so that's where I would like, if people are curious, those are some of the really fun programs we have. And we always love when we have volunteers who want to head those sort of things up. And so,
there's a couple of things I want to extract out of that. And I also want to, I think it's amazing. One of the pieces I want to know is, how big of an issue is food, nutrition, and food security in our local area, and how do we measure that? And I'll go into a little bit of context and then turn that question over to you, Jodi. But what I'm hearing is, you're very volunteer intensive, so we'll make a point to extract that. And so if you're listening, you can volunteer at the food pantry and benefit the community that way. And then I'm hearing a lot of delivery for schools, for students. I know in some of the stints in my earlier chapters, I was working in the schools, and certainly if a kid comes to school hungry, there's going to have this distraction. If they're not getting their basic needs met, they're not going to feel safe. They're not going to have the state of awareness for learning, and they might even display behavior patterns that are disruptive because they just need their basic nutrients as a simple piece. So I love the fact that you are pushing and have these programs in the schools, and I thank you for that. I think it's super beneficial. Back to this question, like, how do we measure, and how serious or how much of an issue is nutrition and food security and access to healthy whole foods? How big of an issue is it here?
Well, as someone who thinks about it day in and day out, I think it's huge. And I'm going to reference the State of the Community report that was put out in, I believe, 2022, early 2022.
Okay.
But the county did this assessment and was really just trying to learn what are folks' needs, where is our community hurting and what do we need more of? And something that came out of that report is something called the self-sufficiency standard. So here's federal poverty level, right? And here's the self-sufficiency standard. And there are a lot of folks caught in between. So this is the self-sufficiency standard is the income you need to make to live comfortably in Gunnison or your community. And the federal poverty level is what the government says, I will give you SNAP for, I will give you housing assistance for. And we have this gap between those two sort of standards. And the pantry is really trying to help the folks who are in between. They don't qualify for federal assistance, but they are not making enough money to meet their needs in Gunnison. So we actually estimate that maybe we only serve about 30% of the folks who actually need food assistance in Gunnison County. And we kind of hypothesize that we know that some folks are utilizing SNAP benefits, which is awesome. We know that some folks are utilizing senior meals through the community center, and there's Mountain Roots who also has some food security projects like their CSA boxes and holiday boxes. And so we estimate we see about 30%, and I know that there are folks who utilize other sources, but just based off the median income in Gunnison County, knowing what it takes to live here, and I can't remember exactly what the income bracket is for the self-sufficiency standard, but knowing what that is and knowing what folks are making, folks who work in food insecurity are going like, where are the rest of the folks who need the food, need these resources? So that's one way that we measure it. And also, on our strategic plan, we say to provide food assistance to everyone who asks. And so for us, that's a measurement. Anyone who comes through our doors and asks for food assistance is served. And in 2022, we served 830 households, which spans out to about 1,790 individuals, and about 400 children. So we served all of the folks who came into our door and were brave enough to say, I need help. Inflation is hurting my family, and my car broke down. We need to fix our furnace before winter, or whatever it might be. But yeah, we hypothesized that we're missing, I think, about 30% of the folks who still might actually need us, which is really sad.
Yeah. Crazy. So for those that are listening potentially in Grand Junction, I mean, we're talking about your numbers, Jodi, are referencing Gunnison County, which we have about 15,000 people in population, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, maybe 5%-ish is already receiving some of the benefit through the pantry. And you're suggesting that's potentially low. I would also think, in that gap between federal assistance and kind of that median, whatever level that really means, that gap is only growing. I mean, with the cost of living, with inflation, with the price of eggs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's only growing, right? So is there, and then you answered the question that I had, as far as people accessing, and it sounds like anybody who asks will get assistance. There's no qualification type opponent, which helps reduce some of the potential stigma, I would imagine, maybe is preventing some of that other 30%. Like, what would be a block?
Well, we think a lot about barriers in our community, and part of the reason why we have such a low barrier process, you don't have to prove your income, you don't have to prove that you're a Gunnison County resident, you don't even have to prove you're a citizen. We don't ask for an ID. I think that some of the barriers that still exist in our community, a lot of them have to do with pride.
Yeah.
We don't have to get deep into it, but like if you think about Reaganomics and the welfare queen and the sort of perception that folks set out to abuse a system, when really it's like the top 1% who are really smart, who can abuse the system. And they spent like most of their life trying to figure out how to do that, right? But it's not as easy as I think folks think, and to be associated with what might be considered a quote unquote handout has a connotation. It means something to people, and that has been that's a systemic issue. That has been something that our society has continued to go, well, that's true, right? Like those people exist. We know from the data that like 1% or less actually try to scam any sort of assistance. And at my time in the pantry, I have never come across someone who I believed was, who wasn't truly in need. Whoa. And so that pride part of it, I think our community is really awesome and accepting, and is growing more and more accepting. And that's something that folks hold really internally. Yeah. When you can't meet your basic needs, you can't meet the basic needs of your family. People don't want to talk about that, and they don't want people to know. And so I think that's where we run into a lot of it, especially with inflation. And I'm suspecting a lot of young people and young families who are going, we're barely making ends meet, but haven't quite gotten over that heart piece of it, which is, feeling like maybe they failed. Yeah. And the pantry's there to make sure that folks don't fail and make sure their families stay happy and healthy.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think, flipping some of that pride, it's like, I'm a repair guy. So if I go do a repair and I've got the right tools, I'm set. But if I need a certain tool, I've got to go get that tool. Otherwise, I'm just going to bumble through it. And as we are talking about caring for our bodies and caring for our families and our children's bodies, like food is that tool, and the pantry is just a tool to the whole mix. So whether it's long-term, short-term, I totally understand the pride component. And I would imagine some of this could just be around ignorance, A, maybe not knowing that the tool and resource is available, B, not knowing how to utilize the tool. So can you walk us through, Jodi, where is the pantry located for Gunnison Country? And what mechanically does it look like? Like if I am somebody that, I mean, is it one meal? Is it really like shopping for the week kind of deal? Is it any of the combination across the board? Like what would I experience as I walk in?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And even if you aren't necessarily someone who's in need, but you're asking yourself that question, the pantry's open to the public. You can always come in and just greet volunteers and grab a loaf of bread. That's always free. We won't make you fill out an application, but I encourage folks, if you're wondering, what is it like in there? Go in when we're open and grab a loaf of bread and meet our volunteers. But the mechanics of it. So currently we are located on Ohio and Maine.
Okay.
We're hoping that in April of 2023, we'll be moving to our new facility, which is off Tamichi. And it used to be the previous Colorado Fitness facility. And so in that space, we're hoping that it'll look like a grocery store.
Yes.
And the idea is that folks will have the autonomy to shop. And that volunteers will be present to help answer questions and make sure that, the process is equitable, that folks are taking an appropriate amount of food for their family. But ideally, we're moving to a more hands-off approach once we have more space. In our current location, we do not have a lot of space, and shopping's a little confusing. And so when you come into the Ohio and Main Street, if you've never been there before, they have you fill out an application. If you're a Spanish speaker, on Wednesdays, we have Spanish and Cora translators available to make sure that your experience is comfortable and you understand the application, you understand the process. But once you're in and the intake has happened, you get to shop. And a pantry volunteer the first few times will come around with you and explain, we have some food limits, and it just kind of depends on what's been shared with us. We share what we've been given. But ideally, you're able to take enough food assistance for the week. And I always try to tell people, come in with your grocery list. Like if you can, I'm really bad at planning ahead, so it's not fair for me to tell folks to do that. But I believe me that it helps. If you're going to make these 6 things, or you want to make these things for dinner, come in with your grocery list and find everything that you can in the pantry. And then we suggest that that's where you can go to City Market and pick up 3 or 4 additional items. But if you come into the pantry with kind of what you're hoping to get out of it, what you're looking for, I think folks have a lot more pleasant experience. Sometimes you can get in there and go, well, now I have kind of a hodgepodge of things, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that. And so we really try to remind our guests, come in with a plan, know what you're looking for, or at least what you're hoping for. But we say we provide enough food assistance for a week for each individual of your household. So if you have 5 members in your household, you'll get to take more food than just someone who has 1 individual in their household. And we use the term food assistance because, again, we share what we've been given, and we want to make sure that we have plenty for everyone who comes through our door. And so at this current time, we don't necessarily give away enough food for a family for an entire week, but we do provide a substantial amount of their fresh veggies, their milk, their dairy, or milk, eggs, cheese, butter. Those are staples. The pantry always has those, and right now those are very expensive.
Yeah, they are.
And we try to distribute lots of produce and staples, so things like beans, rice, breads. Those are always guaranteed in the pantry. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. So just to reflect what I'm pretty sure I heard, I mean, we can think of the food pantry as a grocery store.
A free grocery store. And who couldn't benefit from free groceries?
Man, no kidding. Where does the food pantry's support come from? Not just like dollars and cents to run the budget, but what about the food? Where is this coming from?
Yeah, so we have 3 main food sources. We have what we call our Feeding America partners. So if you've ever seen the pantry van driving around in the morning, we go to Safeway, we go to City Market, we go to Walmart, we stop in at Gunnison Vitamin, and we stop in at Wilder's Organic Market. And so those are folks who pretty regularly donate food to us. And I believe in 2022, our Feeding America partners donated over 100,000 pounds of food to us throughout the year. So that's one major source. And then we have our Care and Share food bank out of Colorado. Matt, pop quiz. Do you know the difference between a food bank and a food pantry?
The bank is going to be a storehouse. The pantry is going to be the grocery store.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So we have, you killed it.
Yes.
We have a distributor based out of Colorado Springs who serves Gunnison County. And so based off of our SNAP numbers, based off of what we are recording that we're seeing in the pantry, they allocate what's called the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP food, to us. So that's some of your and for folks who are familiar with food justice, that's kind of where some of the government food comes from, the government cheese. And so the TFAP program actually has really ramped up in the past few years to kind of work past some of that stigma and give folks better quality and higher quality of food. But that's where our consistent canned goods staples come from. And then our last source is red bucket drives, or when tourists come into town and they're leaving their VRBO and they empty out everything, they drop it off at the food pantry.
Yeah.
And so about 30,000 pounds of food comes in from our community every year, whether it's through hosting red buckets or just the kindness of their heart. But those are the main sources. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Can people donate food anytime?
Anytime.
Right on.
Yes. And give us a call or stop in. But really, I always recommend to purchase food or to give food that you would want to see in your cupboard.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to just want to purchase, a couple of canned goods. But if you're not buying canned goods for your kitchen, thinking about that holistic approach to food and how spices and different aromatic things add a home, a home element to food. And so I just always encourage folks, donate food. Donate it from your heart. What would you want to see in your cupboard? What would you want to see in your pantry? And really try to extend that to the community.
Yeah, I love that. So regionally, you mentioned there's a partner in Colorado Springs that works with Gunnison County. I know in my past, I went to, I believe it's a food bank in Grand Junction that helps serve Mesa County, but there's not necessarily is there any partnership on the western slope for food security, food bank, food pantry?
That's a good question. So I know that our food bank covers a huge portion of the western slope, and then Food Bank of the Rockies also covers, and I don't know where Grand Junction might fall into that, but I'm actually a part of what's called the Rural Mountain Town Coalition, and it's a group of mostly folks who run food pantries, homeless shelters, very basic needs. And it's not just centered in Colorado. It's kind of centered in Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, where we come together and we kind of network and we talk about what we're seeing. And so if there's any food pantries in Grand Junction who are interested in being a part of that, I would first off love to connect with you and would love to connect you to that group, because that is an amazing resource. And I think it's a good way that we can kind of keep up with what's going on regionally, even though we're looking at multiple different states.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question,
No,
Matt.
that's good. And you bring up coalition, and I think, so many of today's challenges and maybe even yesterday's, right? But today we're fronted with challenges, and certainly we're talking about food security today, but you talk about housing, you talk about other health, public safety, mental health, all these pieces. And I think the real solutions are found through coalition work, even though it can maybe take some time in process, because you're pulling multiple people together, and it can create a dynamic of conversation and a pulling of resources that can actually get some solutions going. We're not going to send this conversation, Jodi, for another 30 minutes. And this next question is going to start teetering into where we could go down steep rabbit holes for a long time.
Right.
But you're also part of our community's health coalition. And there's certainly a lot of work going on in our community. And I just wanted to open up an opportunity to speak to some things that people may not necessarily see. So as somebody that's been involved in some quasi-government, some nonprofit in my past, I've seen a lot of the coalition work in our community. I know that there's a lot of resources to support public health, public safety, mental health, substance abuse and prevention, food security. From your perspective, what do you see in our community that folks may not necessarily see day by day, right? Like, it's not like the health coalitions or GCSAP. GCSAP does some okay marketing, but it's not like there's a bunch of marketing going around talking about how much of a supported fabric there is in our community. But I know it's there, and I love your perspective on that. Just from your seat of being involved, and what do you see going on that people may not know about?
Well, first off, if you live in Gunnison and you have not heard of the Gunnison County Health Coalition, give it a Google, reach out to the county, because it's a really wonderful group of folks. And it's a mobilized body. It's people who are doing the work, who are concerned citizens, who come together in a large group once every other month. And then leadership, I'm also on the Health Coalition leadership team. We meet once a month. And then the Health Coalition has split up into 3 subgroups to mobilize and actually really try to get our hands dirty in the community. And I facilitate a workforce development subgroup. And so 3 things that I see that maybe our community members don't when you are busybodying around your, the day, and we have kids and jobs and busy lives. One is a sense of belonging, especially for youth and minority folks, that our community is wonderful, loving, and we are welcoming, and we're still kind of missing the buck on that. Maybe not doing everything we can to work on upstream prevention for youth, right? And making sure that we have a community that's safe and welcoming for youth, and a community that's safe and welcoming to minority populations. Another thing that we see, which is another subgroup, is access to resources. This community is so rich in resources. I mean, the next time you drive by, just really try to look and see, wow, there's a food pantry, and wow, there's Tough Enough to Wear Pink, and there's public health, and all of these really awesome resources that are spread out completely, from Crested Butte to unincorporated Gunnison County, and that they're hard for people to access. They're there, they exist, and people are not, it's maybe not even that people don't know that they are available. It's just the logistics of getting from one spot to another when you have, children and work and life happening around you. So that's one other issue. And then the third is workforce development, which I'm heading that subgroup for, and really just trying to identify what are our workforce's needs, what are our employers' needs, how can we best support this community? Is that through sober work environments? Is that through training? Matt and I had a conversation about mental health first aid or suicide awareness training. And do we need employers to understand this? We work with a transitory population, and those folks are incredibly at risk for different behavioral health issues. And so as a community, we see a lot of behavioral health issues is really what those 3 things kind of boil down into. Is we seem to have resources and support, but folks are not connected to them. They aren't feeling connected to our community. And they're maybe not always connected to the place where they spend the most time, their job, which is really, so that's what I see. It's kind of bleak.
Well, it's bleak, but it's also, there is a silver lining there, because, I think the point that you just illuminated is that in our community, we have a lot of resources.
Yeah.
And if somebody is listening, or if you know of somebody that should be listening who might be, call it a struggle, but wanting to go somewhere, like maybe you're here and we want to go here, right? There's enough resources in our community, as long as we kind of get out of our ego and go shop at the pantry or go reach out to public, whatever it is that we might need. Like, there's enough resources in Gunnison County, and I agree with that. I think that's there's such a fabric of resource is the best word, but there's a lot of strengths that are in our county that a lot of people may not even recognize. And if we did have this recognition, if somebody was driven to go from point A to point B, then string together the resources to help you get there. Go shopping at the pantry for a week and start
Right.
reducing your own out-of-pocket food costs for the short period as needed, or long period.
I think with that, if I may make one more point, really trying to drive community resources to congregate, to come together. So the food pantry in our new facility is working with juvenile services. We're partnering with juvenile services to have peer support navigators in the food pantry and case managers, so that folks who are already coming to the food pantry will now have access to resource navigation and some behavioral health services. And in my mind, that doesn't take away from what the pantry does. It doesn't take away from what these other organizations do. In fact, I believe that we are so much stronger when we're together, and we're not just putting a big old Band-Aid on food insecurity. Instead, we're going, here are the tools so that maybe you won't need to come back to the food pantry in a couple of months. Whenever you're ready, you will, you might not need us anymore. And I think that, at least in my work, that's the most important part is, am I trying to work myself out of a job? Am I trying to give all of my community members everything that they need so that the food pantry is irrelevant? And that's really how I approach my work. And I think that we are so much stronger when we go, like, let's do this together.
Yes.
Because that's what people want. That's what my donors want, right? They want me to help make people more food secure, and that's what our community wants. And I think when we decide to lay down our own ego and go, this is the best for our community, this isn't the best for the food pantry, it's not the best for Cooler, it's the best for everyone, that makes us more resilient and stronger. And I'm so proud to be a part of a community that values that, partnerships.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for adding on there, Jodi. How do volunteers reach out? How do folks that want to utilize the pantry services reach out? How do we find you, Jodi?
Yeah, so you can find us on the internet, GunnisonCountryFoodPantry.org. There's a contact form if you're looking to volunteer. You can you can inquire through our website. You can always give us a call at 970-641-4156. And I'm holding the pantry phone this week, so you might get to chat with me directly. But that's another great way to inquire about a home delivery. Do you qualify for a home delivery? If you're feeling nervous about the food pantry and coming in, you can always give us a call and we'll help you. We'll talk you through it, but what you might be able to expect. And if you're looking to volunteer, you can also give us a phone call and we'll get you connected.
Awesome. We'll share those contacts in our show notes. And if you just heard that, reach out, whether you want to utilize the pantry and go shopping there or to help out as a volunteer. Jodi, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this passion that you have to just give back and help thread together this community coalition work that I think is so just critically important. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me a platform, Matt. It was really wonderful chatting with you today.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.